We now move on to Christchurch and the earthquake in February 2011. As a prelude, in 2004, 2 Israelis were sent to prison in New Zealand and 2 escaped the country for possession of false New Zealand passports. It appears they were Mossad intelligence agents. They are reported to have stolen the identities of dead children and a tetraplegic, then sought fraudulent passports. Helen Clark's Labour government was not conciliatory in their dealings with the matter, and the men went to jail. John Key has a Jewish mother, reportedly active in the Jewish community, and he is therefore considered Jewish, although apparently not practicing. Being Jewish in the financial sector is not usually a handicap. Israeli media take Key as one of our own. The Mossad situation may have changed with a Jewish New Zealand Prime Minister who has openly stated his admiration for Israel. It is possible the Israelis decided at that time to continue their criminal activities, relying on a sympathetic Key to smooth things over if they were again discovered. Genuine New Zealand passports are reported to be highly sought after in the espionage world. Mr. Key should confirm that passport fraud was not the reason for the urgent Israeli contacts during the Christchurch earthquake and the 4 calls from Prime Minister Netanyahu, the content of which he will not fully disclose. Given his involvement in almost ruining the country, the closeness to corruption within the businesses he worked for, his massive financial gains over a short period of time, the reckless policy of increasing New Zealand's debt levels, the Jewish blood ties, and his propensity for making contradictory statements, we surely have a right to know about these things. Back to 2011, and a group of 4 young Israelis were in a van parked on a Christchurch street when the quake struck. The driver, Ofer Mizrahi, was killed instantly by falling masonry. The others escaped from the vehicle and found their colleague trapped. They took photographs, retrieved Mizrahi's own passport, and contacted Israeli authorities. 2 other Israelis were killed, and the report suggests another Israeli was missing. It is completely understandable that Israel would want to find and assist its citizens. During the course of the first day of the earthquake, 4 attempted phone calls were made by the Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, only one of which managed to get through. Key will not elaborate on the content, except to say that there were offers of assistance.
Was taking place as part of those phone calls. He raised a couple of issues. One was to pass his condolences on and to offer support to New Zealand, and secondly to offer support to try and locate or find the individuals in question, because they weren't immediately located straight away.
The Government Security and Risk Group states, quote, "A key role is to support the Prime Minister in leading a coherent and immediate national response to security crises and emergencies, and ensure the Prime Minister is kept informed of significant issues in these areas. It is therefore of great public interest to know what Key and Netanyahu spoke about and why they needed the matter to be taken to such levels. After all, that's what public servants are paid to do." The Israeli ambassador, Shemi Tzur, based in Australia, flew to Dunedin, drove to Christchurch, where he met up with the 3 Israeli survivors. He advised all Israelis to get a car and drive as far from Christchurch as they could. Now, was this because of the physical risk, or because they may have been asked difficult questions? I understand, not being Jewish, although I have some very good Jewish friends, I can accept the friends needed to leave Christchurch at such a time, but they could have located to Wellington whilst their friend's body was retrieved, and then accompanied it on the journey back to Israel. After meeting with the Israelis, Tesur drove them to the airport and managed to get them seated in one of the first aircraft allowed to take off, a Defence Force Boeing 757. That within 12 hours of the quake. Has to be considered very special treatment to the detriment of New Zealand citizens who may have had much greater needs to leave Christchurch. It is stated the dead man had 5 passports with him, and that indeed would be very suspicious.
Second thing I can confirm is I've had no advice on reason to believe that the police intelligence systems have been intercepted or there's been any untoward behaviour in regard to the police systems. Third thing is I'm not in a position to comment, and I don't comment on security matters.
Are you aware of an Israeli national being found in New Zealand after the earthquake with 5 passports on
Well,
it?
I can't confirm the number of passports.
Why not?
Photographic evidence of the Israelis' van provide the exact location, and from this it's possible to make some deductions. The Israelis are world leaders in electronics. Much of the chips and computers are produced there, and even more are designed there. We have no way of knowing what they are capable of, except that it will be very significantly above what we can observe. Whatever they do, the Israelis' number one priority will be to serve the interests of the State of Israel. For example, Intel's double-core processor was completely developed at its design facility in Israel, as well as the MMX chip and Centrina technology, at least one of which may be found in the majority of Office computers. Most of the Windows NT operating system, and presumably current successor systems based on NT, was developed by Microsoft Israel. The Israeli pioneer Checkpoint Limited is a world leader in the firewall and internet security software markets. They would have to know how to infiltrate a computer system to be able to devise security systems to protect it. If you put these factors together, add a little Israeli self-interest, then look at the history and attitude of Mossad, you will clearly understand the ease with which Israel can interrogate any computer and gain access to its data. The Israelis previously used the names of children and a tetraplegic for obtaining false New Zealand passports. Examination of just some of the names of businesses operating in the area where the Israeli van was found shows the potential for such illegal activities. Here are just a few of those whose computers could be accessed by Wi-Fi type systems from the van's location and interrogated at will without trace. If you could choose just one spot in Christchurch to gather data for obtaining false passports for real or for testing systems, using people with disabilities who might never travel abroad, this may well be up there with the very best of them. John Key has repeatedly said that discussing the events concerning the Israelis in Christchurch was not in the national interest. Perhaps New Zealanders will examine his record before he came to Parliament, thus potentially ruining the economy by manipulating the Kiwi dollar make him qualified. As he said at the time, "I really don't see it as a judgmental business. You're simply executing orders for people." In 1991, in the Intercontinental Hotel in Yokohama, Japan, I had dinner with a Jewish person well connected with the Japanese big business. Japan had great big trade surpluses with the USA and didn't know what to spend them on. The Americans persuaded them to buy office towers in New York and other places. It was only after they had completed the purchases that they found out the buildings were in a bad way and needed a great deal of money to keep them. Even if the Japanese did not own a particular building, if there was trouble with one, values would drop and their investments would be nullified. The World Trade Center may have been badly designed, especially in its ability to cope with high winds. From an engineering stance, it could have collapsed. I understood the Japanese were perplexed about their property portfolios. Before 9/11, the terrorists had shown no ability to carry out really sophisticated operations, especially on American soil. After 9/11, they had still not developed techniques to carry out sophisticated operations in America. The terrorists may have been involved, but not at the conceptual and planning levels. If you look at things without any humanity or compassion, there were 2,000 people killed in the World Trade Center, and the total for the day was 2,977. In Vietnam, the loss of American lives was 58,000 and 153,000 wounded. Vietnam did little to enhance America's position in the world, arms sales excepted, of course. Iraq and Afghanistan casualties climbed daily. Now, I mean no disrespect to those who died or were injured on 9/11. I simply make an observation devoid of emotional issues, and ask if, leaving compassion aside, 9/11 could have been considered a really good investment from the establishment's point of view. I don't condone this, I just offer an alternative view for evaluation. Doing nothing at all might have led to much more death and destruction if a building had fallen down. Finance markets would have collapsed. Overall, it may simply have been the absolutely right decision for the country and the people. Perhaps we should be castigating more than just bin Laden for the events of 9/11. However, it seems improbable that after such an unqualified success, the terrorists would not make more attacks to cause even more harm and chaos. Someone must have been pulling the strings. Homeland Security is not that good. The winners are the United States establishment, who have managed to sideswipe the rights, freedoms, and democratic processes of the people. The Israelis, who now have a much better playing field, and those who invested in high-rise buildings who have not had their assets collapse in value. Here's my offer to John Key. I'll drop my interest in 9/11 if you will be 100% honest about the local things that concern me and many others in New Zealand. That seems okay to me, and I'll bet there are a lot of Americans, Japanese and Israelis who feel the same.